Hi, I'm Sandra Kresbach, the Executive Director of the American Technical Education Association, and I first want to thank Ivy Tech President Tom Snyder, Vice President Sue Griffin-Smith, Associate Vice President Burl Turnpaugh, Kathy Cutshall, and Sarah Cleveland for working on this conference, producing this an extraordinary experience for us. I want to take the first moment to thank them for that. And let's give them a round of applause. We'll meet them later. This is really the first session. It's a plenary session in our 52nd conference on technical education. And we will have an official opening of the conference tonight at the Indiana Speedway. I will explain this afternoon to you. We're going to have two plenary sessions. There'll be a brief break between the two, and at 4 o'clock, there's refreshments back in the trade show area if you want to get. It'll be soft drinks and cookies and that type of thing. And then the bus leaves at 5 o'clock for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And Susan Griffin has really worked on making this possible for us. We have a donation of the Speedway itself as a site that is worth $10,000. And we also have a Gold Plus sponsor in Amatrol that's paying for the reception. So we certainly want to thank Paul Perkins for that and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the work that Ivy Tech did to get that event for us. So thank you to them. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of this very first plenary session. And what this plenary is about is ATEA is about building relationships and connections and also giving you state-of-the-art content. And when I talked with Mary Kaye and also Susan Bigelow, who will moderate the second plenary session, she is the VP of Development in Northern Wyoming Community College District, is that there are key networks out there that are affecting and positively impacting technical education. So we wanted to give you an example of how these networks, who they are and how these networks are working. And then the second one is really the advantages for faculty and students when you are in a TAACCT grant. So this session, you will get a presentation that will be both by state-funded and federally funded grants. I would like to introduce the moderator to you, Mary Kay Bredesen. She's on the ATEA Board of Directors, and she is the Executive Director of the Center for Aeronautics and Advanced Manufacturing in Everett, Washington, that is right positioned on the Boeing site. Maybe technically not, but her office is right there. She started out her career as a police officer, and then she she worked for the school district around Everett, and she was led the computer professional development and worked with the computer lab. And as she said, she reinvented herself. She got a certificate to lead a Cisco Academy instructor. And so, of course, ATEA certainly supports certificates, and at any point in your life, it can reinvent you, get you a career, and move you in a completely different direction. 9/11, she had been working then her next career, I don't know if it started around the time of 9/11, but was at the Edmonds Community College campus with the Construction and Industry Trades program. And that was also connected with a tribal group called Tule Lo, I hope I pronounced Layla. My apologies for that name. And then she became the executive director of the Center of Excellence. I will tell you that Mary Kay is an incredible person to work with. She is a catalyst. She moves. I met her for the first time at a regional conference we had in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And that was produced by Dr. Mike Mires, who's on our board, and Maureen Price. And she did a session on their Center of Excellence. And once you are around Mary Kay, you will know her. You can call her. She'll deliver, a contact for you. And so with that, I introduce Mary Kay Bredeson in the first plenary session.
Thank you, Sandra. I always take pride in the number of jobs I've had because if you look at data, our young people, that's the background that they're going to have, and I certainly recognize that and benefited from that. Thank you so much for attending this plenary session. I am very pleased to have a very esteemed group here. We're going to be talking about Centers of Excellence. So I'd just like a show of hands. How many of you know about Centers of Excellence or Banners of Excellence? You could just raise your hand. Great, great. So what we're going to talk about is 3 states. Washington State, who has funded Centers of Excellence for the last 10 years. We've got Idaho, we're North Idaho, because of the reputation that Washington State had, they started 2 of their Centers of Excellence, one on a TAACCCT grant and one on state funded. And then we've got Kansas Board of Regents, where they're also going to talk about how they implement Centers of Excellence. So, to my far, left here, we have Connie Beene, who is the Director for the Career Technical Education for the Kansas Board of Regents. Next to her is Bill Griffin, the Director for the Center of Excellence for Agriculture for Washington State. Next to Bill, we have Shana Peschek, Director for the Construction Center of Excellence, Washington State. To my right, I have Marie Price, Director, Workforce Training, Wood Products Manufacturing Center for Excellence, North Idaho College. And then we've got Mike Mires, Dean, Professional Technical Workforce Training, Aerospace Center of Excellence, North Idaho College. If you could please welcome them. Thank you. So we're going to start off first talking a little bit about what is a Center of Excellence. So if you Google Centers of Excellence, you will get numerous different definitions, everything from Centers of Excellence in business, medical, IT information. Our Centers of Excellence that we're going to be talking about is the following definition. Refers to a team, a shared facility, and an entity that provides leadership, best practices, research, support, and or training for a focus area. And in Washington State, I'll just say that based on a Harvard study that was done back in 2002, 2003, there was a concern for an aging workforce. Who is going to fill the spots or the talent that we as baby boomers will be leaving, feeding that pipeline? And so it was decided that we needed to concentrate on sector strategies. And that is how Washington State, their idea was born to fund Centers of Excellence that would work as kind of a subject matter expert for the industry drivers that surrounded their cluster area in that community and technical college. And you'll see evidence of this later on. But it was to open up communication and be able to connect better industry with our community and technical colleges. So there's a journey when you talk about starting a Center of Excellence. What does that look like? And so we're going to talk a little bit about, at first, exploration and discovery. How would a Center of Excellence fit in your region, in your state? How does your system benefit from that? How do you get started? Where do you build it? How do you build it? How do you roll it out statewide? Challenges, why are some things not working? And then how can you accelerate the adoption of that? So to get started, I'm going to have our esteemed panel here talk about really looking at what we believe is a working model. It's important that you connect business, the people, there's a governance structure, and then talk about program management. And as we all know, if you're from a community technical college, our goal is to make sure that our students, first and foremost, have the skill set that industry is telling us they need. Well, today, that industry technology is changing at such a rapid, so quickly that it's hard to keep up with that. I'm sure many of you feel that way. So it's important that we really are connecting with industry. And then the governance. Who do you report to? How do you become sustainable? And what does that program look like? So, Connie, I think we'll start with you. What did the Kansas Board of Regents decide when they thought they'd set up centers of excellence? What was driving that between connecting industry and the graduating students?
We'll find out if this is on. It is on. So in Kansas, and just to kind of give you some background of how I kind of differ, you may be wondering how does the Board of Regents fit in with the Centers of Excellence that are present with me here on the stage. So I'm going to speak from a state perspective in that we don't have the exact Centers of Excellence across our state that you see with my colleagues up here. But from the Board of Regents standpoint, we have been able to strategize some projects and initiatives that then filter down into these Centers of Excellence. And one of the things I'll talk about today, and Sandra just mentioned, or Mary Kay just mentioned, the business and industry driving it. We have a program alignment process in Kansas that I'll talk about that is driven by business and industry. So while I'm not saying that certain colleges have certain Centers of Excellence, we have the processes in place from the state level working with the community and tech colleges to create different, what you might call Centers of Excellence across our state, but across the state as a whole. So I'll be talking about that in a little bit.
Bill and Shana, with 34 community and technical colleges in Washington State, maybe you could just address a little bit. Bill, you're with the Agriculture Center of Excellence, and you have a great working relationship with John Deere. But how do you disseminate that information from Walla Walla out to the other community colleges?
Well, I learned early on that it was critical, in my former life as an educator, that it was critical to work with industry for a variety of reasons. Making sure that the skills that we were teaching were what was actually needed in the industry, partnering with industry would bring in students, several reasons like that. And so we're always looking for ways to connect education to industry and get the educational group to really buy into that and realize how effective that can be. Our John Deere program, we're one of 4 regional training centers in the country at Walla Walla Community College, where I'm housed. That John Deere Training Center, all of the students that come into that program are sponsored by a dealer. And so there are very specific skill sets that those dealers want those technicians to have. And it's a little bit of a different model that they've evolved where they're there for a quarter and back gone for a quarter, and it alternates for 2 years. And they're sponsored there, their tuition is paid, and their living expenses are paid by their respective dealers in that. But once again, the model for the center, one of the main models, is connecting education and industry.
Shana?
And I'll add on to that. For construction, we really need to support all aspects of that, whether it's residential, commercial, union, or non-union. So being able to work in that world and really be a partner to all those different industry aspects. And not just that, but Washington State is very different in Eastern Washington than Western Washington. So the climate's different, their needs are different, their workforce is different, and there's kind of this attitude that they want to do things their way and not the same as, all the money goes to Seattle. Western Washington gets everything. Nobody cares about the East Side. So being sensitive to their needs and not expecting that what we're doing on the West Side is what they need is really helpful in building that relationship so that we can actually be a very good resource statewide.
Okay, drilling down just a little bit deeper then, looking at the people domain and developing what centers are and how they look differently. I mean, how is this different than just having a department within a community college? I'm going to ask our colleagues from North Idaho to kind of talk about how they adopted a Center of Excellence, their vision and strategy a little bit based on, I think, what you learned from Washington State. We're very close partners. You're very close to Spokane Community College. In fact, Mike, I know you came from Spokane. But you recognized early on the value that the centers were bringing to the state of Washington and the 34 community technical colleges. Can you address that a little bit?
The genesis of our Center of Excellence was aerospace, and when I got to Idaho, North Idaho specifically, we put together a TAACCT grant, and I know a lot of you have probably also put together TAACCT grants. North Idaho is economically connected to Boeing, so even though we're right across the way, we're very close. We're like 20, 30 miles from Spokane. So where we happen to live in Fort Lane, our economic connection is to Boeing in Washington State. So it's kind of an odd, as a state, we're surrounded by 6 states and 1 foreign country, and the governor insists that that's actually Washington State, that's the foreign country. But anyway, in that aspect, so geographically, we have a very interesting sector to serve that we were not serving. So when we established our TAACCT grant, I had worked with Mary Kaye before on the Washington side through aerospace. Aerospace is a very, very big part of the economic outcomes of Washington State. But so in this little sliver of North Idaho, that was a big part of the fact of the manufacturing folks that live there. So when I wrote the TAACCT grant, we kind of by default in our state became the only center of excellence for aerospace that there was. Well, part of that was also composite materials. Composite materials are used in so many industries that it makes sense to say if we're going to establish a composite center that has carbon fiber, fiberglass, other types, that can be used anywhere, but it had never been established. And it wasn't necessarily in the material science, it was really associated with aerospace. But as we established this through our TAACCT grant to serve the aerospace industry, we kind of by default became the center where people can come to say, how do you guys teach composites? How do you do aerospace? Because it wasn't, it really was not probably promoted in the southern part of Idaho. So economically, it drove us to establish something that was unique to our part of the region. And we knew about the model in Washington State because I'd worked a lot in Washington State. So it made sense to say, let's have a place where people can come for resources. That if you do develop composite materials, we have already done that. There's no need to reinvent that. And that's how it kind of got established.
Oh, Mike is correct. We're a strange state. We're very different than southern Idaho, so economically tied to Seattle area. And when we first approached the state about aerospace, they said there is no aerospace in Idaho. So our partners didn't think that there was enough business there to really create something that could be sustainable. And what we found was just in North Idaho, we had over 40 businesses that were tied to the aerospace industry. There were hundreds of jobs with new contracts coming out, and as Boeing was getting new contracts, that meant that we're downwind of the supply chain. So a lot of our industry makes very small parts and components that goes into the 787, the 737, also into the KC-47 Tinker, and so all of these new planes we're going to be needing these supplies. So as we began more exploration, we found that there was a lot of aerospace also in southern Idaho that was tied to Salt Lake City and Delta, a lot of mechanical training that was needed there. So the more exploration that was done, the more we found there was really aerospace all throughout the state. One of the unique things for us is that we really engaged with a convener, and I think if some of you are familiar with that sector strategy model, that it's really important to have a neutral convener to bring industry and education together. And it helps keep politics out of it, keep things objective, and so that for us was Idaho Department of Labor. We work very closely with our partners in government, and they are able to bring industry and education together to help solve workforce problems. So one of the key strategies we employed was being very closely tied to our partner, the Idaho Department of Labor.
Great, thank you. So back to the Washington State Centers of Excellence. If you think back for our state, Washington, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we have 34 community technical colleges that are spread out throughout the state. And at that time, we were all pretty much working in silos, creating our own curriculum, keeping that curriculum, not disseminating it. If Boeing was ramping up to hire, as they were in 2009, 2010, they hired over 11,000 people. in the year 2009, 2010. How do we supply them? Who do they know where to go to for those 34 community technical colleges? They're housed in Renton and Auburn and Everett, but they certainly, our colleges that were surrounding that area, certainly couldn't keep up with the demand. So it was really important that we disseminate that information and connect those community colleges with the workforce. So I'm going to ask the Washington team to talk about the importance of the liaison between the partners and the state's education system. How valuable is it to connect your economic development councils, your labor partners, workforce development, business organizations? Why is that so important when you're working with putting students into jobs?
I'd say the number one reason is that the workforce and a skilled and highly trained workforce is becoming one of the number one reasons why employers and businesses will relocate or locate somewhere. You know, it didn't used to be that was the case. So we're looking for tax incentives and, you know, good land, but really having a workforce that they know is going to be able to come in and make them successful right away is critical. So our ability to say that Washington State is competitive in this, that we have a workforce come, we will supply your needs, we can do incumbent training, you know, is really important for the community colleges to be able to provide that.
In the area of agriculture, one of the things that we've seen is the fact that sometimes the education institutions or the faculty members, like Mary Kaye said, they kind of work in silos, and so the Ag Center works with these groups of people to try to get some commonality with them, and then also making sure that they're aware of what the emerging trends are in the industry. So, for example, a couple of different schools have started a precision in agriculture program where they're doing a lot more with GPS positioning and new technology that is in the field, and also just making sure that the prospective students and the students know of all of the different types of careers that are available. You ask a high school kid, and most of them will probably think of farming or production agriculture, and that's just not the way the industry is anymore. Especially as farms consolidate and become larger, then the areas of expertise are much broader and much more specific in terms of the skills that the person needs. And so making sure that that message goes out so that we can provide those future workers is one of the things that we do.
Connie, can you talk a little bit about how your state is providing statewide coordination?
We have a number of projects that the Board of Regents and Workforce Development Unit, which I'm a part of, is working with the colleges across the state. And I might share just a little bit of the structure to give you a little kind of an understanding of how this looks and how the regents who happen to be meeting today are in Kansas. So the Board of Regents governs the 6 state universities, but we coordinate the community and tech colleges. So that coordination, the link there obviously is the funding, but they all have their own boards, similar to what some of the states that you see on the platform up here. But in that regard, we work closely with them to initiate different projects. One of the things that I heard a moment ago is, it rang very true, is that we are the convener. So as we look at different partnership projects across the state, many times we can't, as the Board of Regents, we can't drive the projects, but we can convene the colleges to roll those projects out across the state. One of them I was thinking of just now that, and this could be done in any state, that we did this last year as they were talking about business and industry projects. I had one of diesel tech programs in Kansas are extremely popular. They're full. The students get jobs. I mean, there's a huge shortage for the employers, even with the number of programs we have. And KDOT, the Kansas Department of Transportation, had connected with one of our community college diesel tech programs instructors and had been kind of going around the state and I don't think had really gotten anyone's ear until he found this one innovative person to listen. So that person called me and said, "Hey, Connie, there's some opportunities with KDOT for all of our colleges, but I don't want to be the college driving it and it looked like us doing it. So what do you think about being the convener?" So long story short, basically, I headed that project, brought the diesel tech instructors together, brought the Department of Transportation together. They have since, and then I let them handle it from there, but we were the convener. So as a result of that, I was at a campus recently, and there's this huge road grader there. And I said, is that from KDOT? So what has happened is the diesel tech programs across our state, and they've all had to do their legal things within KDOT, within their colleges, but they are now, they'll be getting equipment from the Department of Transportation, dump trucks, these huge road graders, different types of equipment that the Department of Transportation doesn't need because maybe it's gotten older, whatever the case may be. And the weird thing is it was easier for them to loan it to the college than to give it to them because just of state legal reasons. But the best part of this instructor told me, we do live work, so we'll get a combine in here and we got to turn it around, get it back out to the owner quickly. So you may have it just a few students get to work on it and not really get to look at the analytics and the real workings and learn as much as they could. In this regard, they have this equipment that they're going to have for 2 years, give back and get other equipment. So as we talk about, the convener, really, that made me think about that in many, many ways, we are the convener for different projects, and we're just glad, and that's something that could be done in any state that has that type of program or similar. But there's a situation where a state agency had an opportunity. They're now actually, the Department of Transportation is going to outsource some of their equipment repair to some of the colleges. And then they're also, they have a couple internships they've already set up and doing a lot of interviewing. So there's an example of something that we can kind of orchestrate from the state and then let the colleges run with it.
So I'm sure by now you're thinking, okay, we like this idea about Centers of Excellence, having a one-stop shop that's connecting industry with our community technical colleges. What are the next steps? Well, at Washington State, that is one thing that's being asked of us quite frequently. We're getting phone calls from the state of California, Ohio, Iowa, across the nation because they are very keen on really connecting industry and listening to their needs and then being able to provide a skilled workforce. So what does that look like? So we're going to look at each one of the states, how we're doing this, because I can guarantee you there is no cookie cutter model. You have to really research what does it mean to have a center of excellence for your state. In Washington, as I mentioned, there are 34 community and technical colleges. In 2003, an RFP went out to all of those colleges to apply for a center of excellence based on the industry sector that surrounded their community. With that, eventually 10 centers of excellence were formed, and these are the centers of excellence you'll see here. We've got the Center of Excellence for Information Technology, Construction, Clean Energy, Marine Technology, Careers in Education, Homeland Security, the Global Supply Chain, and of course, the Center of Excellence for Aerospace and Advanced Manufacturing. And I really like to call out the Center of Excellence for IT. The college that ultimately hosted and is hosting the Center of Excellence for IT is Bellevue College. And if you've been to Washington State, you'd know why. Who sits in their backyard but Microsoft and the supply chain that supports Microsoft in the information technology world. Highline Community College is the Center of Excellence for Global Trade and Transportation. Right there, close to them in Des Moines, is called the DuPont facility, Amazon. Everett Community College hosts the Center of Excellence for Aerospace, where we're at. Who sits in our backyard but Boeing? So it was really important that each college hosted the Center of Excellence, but that Center of Excellence is responsible to, as a resource, is that convener for all 34 community and technical colleges. So you will see with these logos, even though they're assigned to a community and technical college, you will not see the branding of that community and technical college, because it was important that the other colleges felt that the Center of Excellence was theirs as well. So I'm going to have Shana and Bill talk a little bit about how our reporting structure, because it's we report to the president of that community college, but ultimately our work plans, which we file every year, go to the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. We are assessed every 2 years, and I'm going to have Shana talk a little bit about what is involved with that. We are required to file quarterly reports. So there is a governance there to make sure that there is a support, but an executive support in the sense that we are held accountable. So a year ago we brought in all of our stakeholders, legislatures, industry partners, K through 12, and they developed, after 10 years, they developed a vision and a mission plan. So if you could talk about the vision, Bill?
Well, I'm one of the newer directors. I've not been there quite 2 years, but I think one of the things that I had as a vision was making sure that the work that the center did, because I was actually involved with the center when it started as an instructor at the community college, was making sure that the vision included getting the information out. I think our biggest struggle when I took over was that we were kind of invisible. And I think the next thing was making sure that we were representative of all of the 32 community colleges in the system that had ag-related programs. So one of the first things that was part of the vision was that I would go to those schools and visit those schools and talk with the administration and talk with the faculty and see what the issues were. And I'll actually talk about that a little bit later, some of the things that we found out about that. And then, once again, recognizing, needing really strong ties to industry, and so having myself tied to industry, but then making sure that that filtered down to the other community colleges so that we could know what we should be teaching and where the jobs were and what schools could best support them.
Shana, the mission statement. The liaison between the partners and the state's education system.
Yeah, and that piggybacks also on the whole idea of being a convening body. So, and when people want my phone number for the office, it's like I'm never there. I am not in my office. So the best way to get a hold of me is email, because I can actually answer those while I'm out and about. But that's what we have to do. We need to go show up at industry, go to them, show them that we're a partner, gain their respect, and then be able to use those relationships that we foster to really bring their information from them, bring them into the classrooms to speak, highly connected the industry programs to the colleges, and allow for some professional development opportunities. We always talk about internships, but we have been aligning faculty with externships so that they go spend some time out in industry and then share that with the other faculty in the system. And so the mission to be this liaison really comes with an understanding of how to build those partnerships and relationships, and really I liken it to being a translator. When I bring industry and education and all the partners into the room to discuss an initiative or a challenge or an opportunity, it doesn't mean that the words they're using are the same. So when math has been a real struggle for the construction industry. So we bring educators together, industry together. How can we solve this problem so that people come out knowing how to use math skills? Well, the educators and the industry are not talking about the same kind of math. So being able to translate that so that we're all on the same page, just because you're saying math doesn't mean it's the same thing. So you need to learn math, but you've got to be able to apply it when you get on the job. And it is a different thing. So that's an example of how our mission is really driven by that ability to be that liaison, that translator, that collaborator to meet the needs of both educators and industry.
Great, thank you. So, Mike, you talked a little bit about how the Center of Excellence for Aerospace came about with the TAACCCT grant. Marie, maybe you could spend a little bit of time and tell them how the wood products manufacturing Center of Excellence came to be.
I told Marie before we started this, I should tell you a little bit about, to understand the Center of Excellence for Wood Products, you have to understand Idaho. As far as the geography, I always tell people, the only potatoes we have in North Idaho is the ones we find in the store. And they wouldn't know a pine tree from a fir tree down south unless they went to Lowe's and looked at the grain of the lumber. So they don't have trees down south, and we don't have potatoes up north. So the state is very diverse in its geography. So our Center of Excellence, and she's going to talk about this on wood products, was established because we have nothing but trees everywhere you go. If you've been to North Idaho near Coeur d'Alene, and if you've ever been down near Boise, it speaks for itself. I won't give you any more. But with that, I'll give this to Marie.
Well, again, industry-driven is the key here, and our Wood Product Center for Excellence is very much industry-driven. We have the human resource managers from our three industry mills. Our partners are Idaho Forest Group, Potlatch, and Stimson Lumber Company, and together they have 11 mills in North Idaho with over 1,400 jobs and over half a billion in annual revenue. The history, of course, was through the recession. A lot of mills shut down across the region, across the nation, and because it is a cyclical type of industry, there was a perception that the jobs are hard, it's dirty, it's not a good living wage career, and basically families discouraged their kids from entering. Well, today with advanced manufacturing, it's a very clean industry. There are living wage jobs, but the challenge, of course, is the silver tsunami, which is, of course, the graying and the aging of the baby boomers. And as you can see, the number one concern for our partners was replacing that aging workforce, as it is across the nation, and that there were new skill sets that were required because of advanced manufacturing. Instead of pulling green chain, as they call it, standing there in the production line, now you're working in a booth, you're looking at monitors, you have to have some computer skills and understand how those operations work. And then really there's no industry standards in terms of certification for a lot of the jobs there. For example, programmable logic controllers, there is no standard training that for the industry. There's no certifications that can say you've achieved a certain competency and can work in a certain area. And so part of the challenge there was for us to help the industries develop skill certifications and standards.
Talk about the thing.
Sure. So we were able, our state put together workforce development training fund grants out of, it's actually out of workforce comp money. And we had to actually have industry partners, a minimum of 3, that put in 25% cash match, which I think was a good strategy because it really meant that those partners that were willing to invest were the ones that were going to come to the table. And so because they've invested, we have participation, we have commitment, and but then we also have expectations. We're expected to deliver. So the challenge for us is they ask a lot, as many of you know that work with industry, sometimes they ask the impossible, and but we have to negotiate with them and say, well, here's what we can do, here's what our scope of work is, and we come to agreement. Again, with our convener there, our Department of Labor, we're able to also work with the industry and develop outcomes that they're satisfied with.
Okay, and I just want to be clear. So the Center of Excellence for Aerospace was funded by round 1 TAACCCT grant, and then the Center of Excellence for Wood Manufacturing was the state funded. Okay, great. All right, Kansas, you're up. If you could just talk about your program alignment and developing your systematic process for employer engagement.
Alrighty. As I talked about the Regents as kind of the drivers of different projects, one of the things that we continue to try to do is look across the state and determine what barriers are out there and how can we remove barriers to institutionalize change across our state to help community and tech colleges succeed in some of those hurdles that they face. So one of the things that, in fact, I just got the offer letter back from the person that we hired. We created a joint position with the State Department of Education and the Board of Regents, and this is very similar to a model that we already have in our state, where we have a person who is half-time works for the Board of Regents, half-time works for the Department of Commerce. So I think we've always worked close, but then there's just that closer tie even to different projects, because in our state, all of that, we're all holding hands. And so Commerce is the closest agency that we do that with. However, she just accepted this position this morning. And so one of the things that she's going to be doing as we look at career pathways is to develop a web tool that will show progression for parents, students, counselors at the high school level, all the way through to their selected community or tech college. And we actually kind of stole this from the state of Oregon. They have a similar tool that we're going to kind of pattern that on. So we hope to have that up and running next year. And it's funny in talking to the Department of Ed and the Board of Regents, we have all the data. We have all of that pathway data housed in either the Department of Education or in the Board of Regents data housing. And so it's just a point of building the overlay to connect those. So we are very excited about that. And then one thing, when you were talking about Shana was talking about the eastern and western side of their state, well, ours is kind of reversed. But it's like the chicken and the egg, and where are those going to connect? And so when we look at these projects, we have to look at it, because western Kansas is very much remote, whereas eastern Kansas is the Kansas City side. And so it is difficult. We're kind of in the middle, which I guess we are in the middle. But we are in the middle in technically trying to help all of those people. Okay, so the other thing that we've tried to do in the last year and a half is to develop a systematic process to recognize employers. And this is actually a required component of the new WIOA legislation. And so, as you know, more of the regs on that just came out last week. But when the initial kind of guidelines and what that looks like came out, I called our Secretary of Labor and said, hey, Lana, I just want you to know that a component and actually on the Department of Labor's shoulders is to have some tool to recognize employers. And I said, remember, we already have that. So check that off of the list. But what we did is to bring together initially business. We brought together workforce, business, education, etc., to find out how they're working with their partners right now, and what do businesses want? How do they want to be recognized? Because we can sit in Topeka, Kansas, and we think we might know, but we don't know. So we basically brought these people to the table, and at the end of a lot of conversations, we found that number one, they want access to the students, and number two, they want to be recognized and thanked for their recognition, basically. And so we developed a 3-tier process, and there's a little bit of information about this up here. I would be happy to share a lot more specifics about this, because I know all of you attend conferences and you sit in the audience and you think, man, that's really great, they're doing it in that state, but it won't work in mine. We've all been there and done that. This model that we've adopted, it is a pure recognition system that will work anywhere. Now, I was in Washington last week and listened to another state talking about employer engagement, but they were focusing on the how. How should we get schools and employers to engage? Which kind of struck me, because in Kansas, I don't think that we have the problem that they're not engaging. Our issue is, how can we recognize that engagement and then encourage continued engagement. So we developed a 3-tier process. It's probably on version like 75 right now. But we developed a 3-tier process in that depending on what activities that they are having with how they're engaging with the college, they might be a supporter. Then, as they continue to engage in different strategies and different efforts, they can move up to a partner or they can move to a champion. And so I'm really proud to say that of our 26 community and tech colleges, right now we're at 19 or 20 have all implemented this at their institution. They can nominate them at any time. One of the fears, and I'm speaking to educators and community and tech college administrators here, so the question came back is, well, because we wanted to know, give us a little bit of information about these people. Could we get an email address? How big is the business? We need a little bit of data because the legislature is going to ask me to provide updates as to this, and so will our regents. And of course, the fear, and I've worked for many years at a campus, as well, are you going to contact them? And our answer is no, we are not going to contact. We want to send them our business and industry newsletter. We will recognize them in the newsletter if you send us pictures of you and that type of thing, but we do not contact them. So what we do once we receive nominations for this, and it's up to the school to nominate them. When they send me the information, they go on our website, and we return to them a certificate of recognition that's framed, and it has a signature of our CEO and president of the Regents and Department of Commerce. And then that school has the opportunity to do with that as they please. So it's an opportunity for them to go back out and thank the business for engaging and not ask for anything. And so I'm very excited that across the state now we're seeing a lot of different types of recognition ceremonies, and sometimes our staff is involved and goes and shows up and shakes hands. Sometimes they do it on their own, but we have a page on our website where we have a lot of pictures, and then the colleges actually ask if they could get an extra copy of that certificate so they could kind of create walls of fame in their college. And not only that, but for example, in the nursing area, they wanted a copy to display who their partners were in their area, or the auto tech, or so that's been very positive. Probably the struggle that we had was getting that information to the right people, because I work with the academic deans, I work with the presidents, I coordinate the Perkins for our state, so I work with the Perkins coordinators. But this really needs to get to the faculty level, because as faculty, you know who your partners are. The president, I mean, they probably kind of know, but they don't know to what level that they're engaging. So it's been a process, but it's very, very positive.
And so, if you could just talk a little bit about the creation of the Regional Manufacturing Council.
Sure. With the Regional Manufacturing Council, we also, when we talked about this kind of, to me, is a center of excellence for the advisory councils, in that what we saw across our state were secondary and post-secondary institutions all needing to have advisory councils for various reasons, but also because it's tied to Perkins funding. And so what we did in the Wichita area was to, number one, we joined Dream It, Do It initiative for our state last year. So the Regents joined that initiative for our state through the National Manufacturing Council. But in that region of Wichita, Kansas, and this is where aviation is big, along with advanced manufacturing, but the Workforce Alliance actually staffs this council, but it brings together secondary, post-secondary, and the business partners. So they have one big advisory council and then break out into what specific areas they're in. But it's been very positive and has removed that duplication of effort with everybody going to the same businesses. And I think it's been positive in that it's not just stamping, well, we had a meeting and they all walk away, but they're actually getting some good feedback.
Wonderful. Great. All right, so back to Washington State. As we mentioned, each center is required to file a work plan with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. They run that work plan by their advisory board. Each Center of Excellence has an advisory board, and the work plans are focused on what they call core expectations. We're going to talk about 3 of them very briefly. So the first one is economic development focus, serve as partners with various state and local agencies, regional, national, and global organizations to support economic vitality and competitiveness in Washington State. Bill, can you just give a brief example from your work plan that would support that core expectation?
Yes, the Agriculture Center of Excellence is administrating a grant from the USDA that provides curriculum creation and program development in the areas of bioenergy and plant operations. It actually started as bioenergy, and then we included plant operation. That curriculum, as well as the equipment for lab outfitting, and is provided by this grant, and we're working with 3 different community colleges to provide those programs. It also includes free tuition and fees for any student wanting to take these programs at these 3 community colleges. Actually, one of them is in Oregon and 2 are in Washington. One on the east side of the state, one on the west side of the state. And so we coordinate that effort. Once again, we don't actually create the curriculum or anything like that, but we make sure that happens. And so we're kind of a clearinghouse for that.
Great. So core expectation number 2, industry sector strategy focus. Collaboratively build, expand, and leverage industry, labor, and community and technical college partnerships to support and promote responsive, rigorous, and relevant workforce education and training. Shana, can you talk a little bit about something from your work plan that supports that core expectation?
Sure. So, and going back to the work plans, those are created yearly, allowing the centers to be extremely flexible and responsive. As long as we are meeting these core expectations, the actual deliverables are things that we can respond to when industry educators come to us during the year so that we can assist them. One of the things that all the centers have is an advisory board ourselves. So this is kind of a sector or regional advisory board. Our advisory board members are government, industry, education, K-12, all of the stakeholders that we really feel we need to come together to find solutions to challenges. This year I took this a step further and had a 3-part strategic planning session with my advisory board members to get a kind of a 5-year plan. I feel like this was a really impactful exercise for the advisory board members because now they came up with this strategic plan. Their fingerprints are on it, so now they're going to have to help me implement this. So it was really good getting beyond just the yearly thing, getting a vision in place and having them have a say in that.
Okay, and core expectation 3. I'm going to address that if you don't mind. I just want to share one that we do. So education, innovation, and efficiency focus. So what does that mean? Leverage resources and educational partnerships to create efficiencies and support development of curriculum and innovative delivery of educational training. As I mentioned, we're a Center of Excellence for Aerospace. We work very closely with Boeing. How many of you know about the 3D engineering tool design, ATEA? You know how expensive it is. The seat licenses, so just for an example, in one community college, you've got 4. Yes. So I learned that the colleges for like 25 seats was running around $15,000 to $17,000 for each college. Through the networking of traveling with our governor to the Paris Air Show, Farnborough, I know it must sound very glorious and whatnot, but we work hard. We met up with Dassault Systems, who owns ATEA, and they said, how can we get more licenses into the community technical colleges and actually drop down to K-12? I said, well, you got to drop your price because nobody can afford that. I would love to go into detail, but eventually through working through our Department of Commerce, this is where the networking comes into play. And talking with Dassault Systems at the Paris Air Show, the Center of Excellence now purchases 700 site licenses. We purchase it, put it on the server at Everett Community College, and it's at a significantly reduced price. So remember what I told you, 25 licenses at about $15,000 to $17,000. I pay $18,000. It includes a $3,000 maintenance fee for 700 licenses. Why? Because we bought in bulk. That's what we're talking about. If you have a one-stop resource that disseminates to everyone, that's, I think, some money well spent. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the journey. We don't get there without some challenges. There are challenges, and I think the Centers of Excellence for 10 years, we can speak to that, even the newbies. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you expand the system, planning, operations, who do you report to? I already kind of told you what Washington State does. But trust was mentioned. Trust between the community technical colleges, trust between your industry partners, and then visibility. So I'll just let anybody jump in here that wants to talk about the challenges they might have had setting up their Centers of Excellence.
You know, I worked a lot with Mary Kaye earlier before I went to Idaho, so I know our challenge is different. Ours is more, we still have our training wheels on, so we've got a lot to do and a long ways to go. Ours is that we're geographically isolated, so we have some really long distances. The closest we are to Boise, which is the next city down, is 8-hour drive. So it gives you a sense of some of our isolation. So it's harder to share when you're so far away. On the other hand, it's a little easier because of the geographic isolation. We do our development of centers that are probably fairly unique to our region. So if they do need that type of information or training or curriculum or other materials that we have, it's also very easy to say we've already established that as we push the composites and so forth out. That's easier. In working in Washington State, I know the east-west problems and the I-5 corridor, there's 34 community colleges that have kind of competing for a very similar types of resource centers. Boeing innovates, if you've been in Seattle, it's clear down in Tacoma all the way up to Bellingham. So it really it touches probably in access to 20 different colleges on the I-5 corridor. So it would always be nice to be that center of excellence for that, because they all have a lot of things in common. I know it's a little different, but because we're very, very new to establishing our centers, we still have a long ways to go to push the idea out. And a lot of it's going to be a little easier because they have nuclear plants in the south in Idaho. We don't have anything that has to do with the nuclear industry up north. It's all hydroelectric. So because of our odd geography, our things are very different. So in a way, it's easier, but our distances make it a little harder. But so we have a little different kind of challenge. It's mostly getting it out there.
So one challenge I would say is that, especially in doing outwork and networking to people you haven't met yet, or who you're not getting an introduction for somebody else, you come across people who are suspicious, or like, what is she going to try to sell me, or what am I going to have to do? So finding ways to break down that communication and get people to understand that working collaboratively for a collective impact is much more meaningful, and getting past that initial, especially during the recession when everybody was really suffering from more funding. People are trying to get the same funding pools, going after grants. Having the center show up and say, I'm just here to help collaborate, help you get the needs you want. Sometimes you have to break down those barriers first to get that communication going. So that is one of the challenges, I think, is making sure that that people know that we're here, and it's not just industry partners, it's other partners as well, that we're here to help them and be a resource to them. So.
when I first started in my visits with various community colleges in Washington, I always asked a lot of the same questions to try to find out what's going on and what their needs are. And of course, like Shana said, they wonder what you want. And really, the centers are all about, how do we help you? And so I came across this common thread that a lot of the deans and faculty members wanted to know about articulating the four-year schools and programs. And so we were able to take one of the schools that does that very, very well and get a group together and say, now here's what you're running into with the roadblocks, and here's how to get over those roadblocks. And I know one school in particular had been fighting this battle for over a year, and after we had this meeting, in about 45 days, they were able to have their articulation agreements taken care of. Just getting the information on how to bypass these roadblocks. And it was just a matter of getting the people that had done it connected with the people that were wanting to do it and moving forward. And so that's one of the ways that the centers get the information out there.
So another huge challenge is the funding. We're not funded at a huge level, and from the inception, at one point I think they actually encouraged us to become self-sustaining, and then realized that at the state level they needed to fund us as well. So we have had to get creative about how to supplement the base funding. There's been a lot of sponsorship asks when we do things, registrations, finding ways when we produce our resource guide. I've offered advertising space. Sometimes I feel like I'm just on the corner with a little monkey and the music box and stuff, but finding not huge asks. I mean, these are all smaller financial asks and opportunities for people to get their company's name out there and be sponsors and stuff. But those are other ways that we have had to get creative with trying to support our initiatives and projects too.
So here are the benefits that we feel in talking amongst each other. Benefits to the systems with Centers of Excellence. Under business, access to a skilled and trained workforce, direct input on what's being taught. So again, what was mentioned, and I can only refer to Washington State, 34 community technical colleges, we wouldn't expect Boeing to go and visit every 34 colleges and say, okay, what programs do you have and how many students do you have graduating? It's more beneficial for business to have that one-stop shop to connect with instead of having to connect with the 34 community technical colleges. So as a liaison, we're able to do that. And then also access to training for current employees and to stay competitive as well. Education, connections to industry. That's really huge. As Shana said, we're out there making that connection on behalf of the colleges. Sure, the ProfTech, in Washington State, you're required to have a advisory board, but we've found that many times you don't really have the right industry people there to support that program. Who's going to do the internships, externships, etc. And then resources for industry, emerging trends and technologies, outreach and marketing. And then, of course, for the students, there's huge benefits. Pathways for careers. We're establishing clear pathways, starting with K through 12 all the way up to the 4-year. Being better at dual credit opportunities, short stackable certifications. And then, of course, most of our Centers of Excellence have their own websites, and we post jobs on our websites. Even on our website, industry can go in and pick by cluster the types of jobs that they need hiring for. We have contact information, when that class is graduating, the number of cohorts, etc. So, funding. Of course, that gets to be a big question. So here's Washington State's funding model. As we stated back in 2004, 2005, when our centers started receiving state funding from our state board for community technical colleges, we received each center, remember there's 10, $100,000. That was our budget. Many of us worked part-time as a director, and then we were doing another job. because $100,000 for what we were asked to be doing is not much. Also, it was clear at that time we were just a region. We were responsible for a region. And as we became more popular and we were starting to break down those silos, our job responsibilities became greater. So you'll see there was a jump in 2006, 2007, and then in 2009, we were actually codified into state law, Centers of Excellence. And so there was a jump there. So each center received $170,000. And then in 11, 12, the recession hit. And so just like the community technical colleges, our Centers of Excellence, they took 3% right off the top. So our funding went down, and it's just been recently that we've been able to, in this last year, for the first time, we received $205,000. Now that's per center. So over a 10-year period of time, each center has only received, not only, but $1,643,000 for 10 years. But I want you to see the return on investment. These are the 10 Centers of Excellence, and this is actual, what I refer to as hard, cold cash. These are part of the grants or funding streams that we have actively been participating in. This is funding that we have brought into the state of Washington, not for our Center of Excellence, but for the community technical colleges. So right there, Aerospace and Advanced Manufacturing, our grant writer for the Center of Excellence wrote the grant for Spokane Community College, known as, it was a DOL TAACCCT grant, $20 million that incorporated a consortium of 11 community and technical colleges. We just finished that, and we've received quite a bit of kudos from Department of Labor and Secretary Bredesen because that was a very highly functional grant. We were supposed to train 2,615 students. We ended up training over 3,000, and it was very significant. But not just our center. You can see, all told, $71 million the Centers of Excellence have brought the funding through being in a strong partnership into the state of Washington. Here are some of those examples of external funding. Now, this isn't leverage resources. This isn't ATEA that I mentioned. That's a savings, but that's different. This is the grant funding that we have brought in, and these are the funding sources. So what do those outcomes look like? And I'll have any of my colleagues here want to talk about any one of these. These are some of the outcomes from what the funding has provided. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. I hope you have questions because we've got some experts up here. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Yes. Yes. Yeah, so each center was asked. So these are grants that they were a part of that brought. So as I mentioned, so the Center of Excellence for Aerospace and Advanced Manufacturing. Most colleges do not have, or certainly back 4 years ago, don't have their own grant writer. Spokane Community College was one of them. So they asked that our grant writer be loaned out to Spokane to write this Department of Labor grant. But before that, the whole idea of Aero Washington was to build capacity in aerospace jobs around composites, avionics, advanced manufacturing, aircraft assembly. But they only got that information because our Center of Excellence held monthly meetings with about 15 of the community technical college workforce deans up and down the I-5 corridor. with Boeing, Hexcel, and a couple of other composites companies, big aerospace companies that knew that they needed to ramp up their hiring, and those jobs were changing. And so it was with those monthly meetings, which we affectionately called ACAT, Aerospace Curriculum Alignment Team. We met with them for about a year. Boeing came in, gave to the Center of Excellence to disseminate out to the other community technical colleges 37 job codes, entry-level job codes, with the knowledge, skills, and abilities, the KSAs. With that information, we then crosswalked that to the 34 community colleges, their training programs, and identified each one of them. And it became very clear they were talking about 5 areas: composites, aircraft assembly, airframe and power plant maintenance, avionics, and at any rate, right. Yes, yes. And it's working as a system, not just one community, not just Spokane, but it's working across the state, those colleges that are offering those programs as a consortium and breaking down the silos, really. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. Anything, another question? Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't know if anyone else wants to address that. Okay. Yes. Okay. So, for example, as you mentioned, so the Department of Labor grants now require that students use their Social Security number. They have to sign an intake form. Many of us, it's hard to track once they leave our system. Where did they get that job? Am I following what you're asking? So how were we implementing that? So we set up other, so I can only speak for Center of Excellence. We've got an additional organization called the Aerospace and Advanced Manufacturing Pipeline Committee that has industry on that committee that then reviews our training programs to see where students are being placed and if they have the right skill set. So there's that. So we're a part of that. If that's what you're asking.
I think she's also maybe referencing if when you're out on your travel and a company's like, oh, Washington, how's your workforce there? People will go and say, we need Mary Kaye to come address this, because she can instantly answer potential business questions about that. Right.
Right, and as I mentioned, that's why we travel with our governor and the trade development to the Paris Air Show or to Dubai or to Farnborough, because if the Washington State is trying to bring new business into the state, who better knows if they have a skilled workforce than the Center of Excellence that is working with those. And plus, the businesses are beginning to trust us, and they call upon us to add to that testimony.
From the Idaho side, I could speak to that, that we do work collaborative with our Jobs Plus Economic Development Corporation as well as the Department of Commerce. And same thing is you want to build that supply chain. And so by knowing that we have a Center of Excellence, when our economic development specialists are speaking with potential new businesses, they will take them out to our center and show them how we're building that trained workforce. So it definitely adds value to those recruitment efforts.
Marie reminded me of something, and I totally forgot to mention this, but to give your Center of Excellence a lot of credibility, our aerospace composite advisor for the program is Bert Rutan. That helped a lot. If you know who Bert Rutan is, the guy who designed Spaceship One. So that was an accident. He just happened to move there. But
And we do have an aerospace, Idaho Aerospace Alliance is another key thing we didn't mention, but part of our development of our Aerospace Center was to have that industry alliance, and it is, again, industry-led, and it started in North Idaho, but it has now membership throughout the state, including southern Idaho and Boise area. So by having that Center of Excellence and starting that alliance, we've been able to then attract business for the whole state and also attract the attention of the governor and the legislature.
Any more questions? Well, again, thank you very much. We appreciate talking about Centers of Excellence. We're very proud of our Centers of Excellence. Right now, before we change over to the second plenary session, we're going to let you stand up, stretch your legs, don't go too far. We're just going to change places, but thank you very much.